Pelican Bay State Prison. While many people have heard of Pelican Bay, as you look at this picture of the entire prison, it's that white X-shaped structure that made this prison so notorious. That is Pelican Bay SHU, the security housing unit. A place filled with windowless hallways, concrete, steel. The home of the most dangerous criminals incarcerated within the California Department of Corrections. What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. Today we're going to talk about Pelican Bay. I've done a lot of videos on Pelican Bay. And I feel like Pelican Bay is one of those prisons that you can do thousands of videos on and people still won't get it. You get glimpses. We each have our own, those of us that have spoken about Pelican Bay, we each have our own individual interpretations based on how we process things within our mind. And even when we give you these glimpses, unless you're really there, unless you're actually doing time there, you can't figure it out. You can't get it. But still we try. Pelican Bay within the prison community, between the convicts, inmates, whatever you want to call them, sometimes it's a source of contention. There's guys that were never there that will always say, man, that place wasn't all that. The Bay wasn't all that. And that's weird because I was never in high desert. And I always say that was one of the wildest places from inception, from when it opened. I remember the first murder that took place in high desert. All the guys that got gaffled up for that got sent to Pelican Bay. We were all on B facility together. But I want to kind of it's weird. I want to give you guys a better understanding of it, but it's so hard to explain. In the intro, I talked about the windowless corridors. Before I get further into it, I was in Pelican Bay multiple times. I was in the SHU 4 times. I was on A facility 1 time. I was on B facility 2 times. And I don't care what anybody who wasn't there says. That was a different feeling. Being in the SHU, as well as being on B facility or A facility, especially B facility. When you hit that place, you have to remember, or you have to understand, you could be on B facility or A facility and you need to go get x-rays. Unlike all the other prisons, you go to get an x-ray, there's the legends right there. One of them is getting an x-ray. So you chop it up with them. It's not the same as being in the SHU with them and they get to understand you and get to know you and see how you think. But still, you go to get an x-ray or physical therapy for something, boom, there they are. They may ask you something, or they may give you a verbal. And that verbal may involve a lot of violence. Being on the yard there was different because it was just like every other shoe kickout yard. Everybody was getting out the shoe, but because of the vicinity, because of the nearness to the shoe, it did something different to people. Also, now most of the yards are like Pelican Bay was back then. I talked about how in other joints, dudes might get sent, hey, we need you to hit this dude. And the guy will go hit him, boom, 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 and then walk off and get away with it. And that was fine as long as the target got dropped. As long as the target wasn't able to try to get back into the cell block, that's fine. If you can hit him good and get away with it, that wasn't frowned upon. Then the Pelican Bay effect took place. I did a video on this. Prior to yard being released in Pelican Bay, all cameras were turned on. The entire yard was on camera. And then underneath Central Tower, they had one of those bulbs, those balls, those black balls. And that was ISU, Investigative Services Unit, the black patches. Those guys can actually manually move the camera to whoever they were keeping an eye on, zoom in to try to read their lips, or see if they're burying something, pulling something out, whatever. But every inch of that yard was being video recorded. So whenever somebody got hit, there was no getting away. And so when dudes were getting hit in Pelican Bay, there wasn't even a thought like, hey, I'm gonna try to get away. No, it was, I'm gonna kill this fool. I'm gonna catch another case anyways. And the guys that when that was figured out, like, hey, Holmes, there's no point in trying to get away. Holmes, might as well take him to the dirt and try to just take his win. Those guys would go to the shoe. And that was a thing in Pelican Bay. The only way you could leave Pelican Bay was to catch a shoe term and get put up for transfer in the shoe. Because once you hit A or B facility, you weren't going nowhere. You can go to the shoe. That's about it, right? So dudes would do a sticking on the yard, go do their shoe term, get put up for transfer from the shoe, hit another yard. They sat back there for a couple years doing their shoe term. They were able to sit down and converse with the top individuals for whatever faction they were from. They were educated personally by those individuals. And so when they leave the shoe, never fails. They leave with certain directives, certain orders. And they also left with a Pelican Bay mentality. When they land somewhere, all that trying to get away, shot in there. Take them to the dirt. And so Pelican Bay had an effect on the entire system. At least the level 4 180s, all the shoe kickout yards. Fuck you mean get away? I'm going to take them to the dirt. And they're sending 2 people. I always tripped out. It really did trip me out though when you would come down, like for an example, I've told the story. In 2001, right before the attacks in New York, 9 of us left from Pelican Bay down to Sea Yard, Sea Facility in New Folsom. When we got there, the leadership there for the Southerners had been doing stuff wrong for a long time. And our arrival shook the whole yard up. Literally 50 dudes, minimum 50 dudes, somehow got special transfers out of that facility, out of that prison, or straight locked it up, went into protective custody because 9 dudes came down from Pelican Bay. That was a lot of dudes to hit that yard. Usually we would go to B facility. B facility was packed, so they sent us to C facility. I had a victim over there. He was a good dude, but somebody that I had whacked years prior because he had it coming, and he fixed the whole thing, and he was over there. So they can't house me over there, so they moved me. That's why I went to C facility. But everywhere dudes would go, if they came out of the shoe, and I want you to understand something. So in the beginning, if you go back to the beginning of the video, you see the yard. Yeah, that gray walled box, that's the yard in the shoe. And those of us that have been to the Bay, we always talk about, you don't see the sun. You can go to the yard, and the top of the yard is uncovered. But it's got plexiglass over it, and then steel mesh over that. There's a cutout where the camera sits, so you can kind of get a little bit of sun in a certain area. If you get released from your cell to the yard cell at the right time, you can get a little bit of sun. There's about a foot wide patch of sun that can come in and hit the yard. And so when you would go to Pelican Bay Shoe, you would get your skin would get like, it was almost like if it was translucent. Like you could see people's veins. But see, we don't notice it from each other because we're there with each other. No sunlight. Just turning into this weird ass color. It's not until you get out of the shoe. And again, go to the beginning of the video and look at where Pelican Bay is. It's in the middle of a forest. It's right near the Oregon border. It's always gloomy. It used to rain like 8 months out of the year. Even coming from the shoe to that gloomy ass yard, A facility or B facility, you're going to get sunburn. That's how deficient your skin is. But you get out there and people see you like, damn, homie, you need a tan. You need this sun. Sometimes, as I said, you would get transferred from the shoe down to a place like New Folsom. If you leave the shoe and go to New Folsom and you land there in the summertime, you better be covered up. You will blister everywhere. I saw dudes come out and homies would tell them, hey, Holmes, cover up, eh? This sun is, you ain't, like, you just got out the zapato, you just got out the shoe. Nah, homie, I need that sun. Their entire head just full of blisters within a couple of days. People ask me, why was Pelican Bay Shoe so quiet? It's the way the convicts wanted it. The most legendary, most violent, most dangerous criminals that California was producing, they wound up there. You're in their house. For the Southerners, they used to have a code word. It's not, everybody knows it, so it's not like I'm talking about something that's not known. They used to have a code name for Pelican Bay, Teotihuacan. Or like some people, modern, the modern way of saying Teotihuacan, but it's Teotihuacan. That means the place of the gods. Because that's where all the heavyweights were. And so when you went into that place, You abided by the rules that were in place. You showed respect to those that were there because they were there forever. Now everybody's out. And it's a trip to me because I remember being in the shoe. I remember dudes, and I'll say one of them's name, man. Shorty from Orange County. Shorty from Orange County was a really good dude, man. I met him when I got out of the shoe in 99. Shorty picked a side. The thing that led up to the war, the riot of 2000, it was a clusterfuck. And there was a lot of jockeying for position within the Southerners. And Shorty picked a side. And his side lost. And everybody on Shorty's crew, which were all good dudes, every one of them except, I believe, Shorty and one of his homeboys from Orange County, and a dude from San Pedro. Everybody that knows. I'm not going to say the rest of these dudes' names. But those three dudes were the only ones in their crew that didn't get whacked. And I remember Shorty, we were in C2 together. After all this, I remember I believe it was 2005. And they were passing out trays, passing out breakfast. And they had fed his pod and were moving on to the other pods. I don't know what made the cop go back into that pod, Shorty's pod. But from the time they handed him his tray, and then just for some reason went back in there for something, Shorty had took his life. He had taken his own life. And there were a lot of people that took their lives in there. There were a lot of people that went insane in there. Unless you were in Pelican Bay shoe and did time there, there's no way for you to understand the psychological warfare that goes on. It was different. There were a lot of people who were taken out by their cellies in Pelican Bay shoe. And now I see pictures of Pelican Bay shoe and it houses level 1 guys, or I don't know what their level is. But the pod doors are open now. There's a table in the little tiny pod area. There's a TV. And those dudes are smiling. I think for a lot of us that did time there, it's a trip for us to see that. And I think the authorities, the brass in Sacramento see those pictures and it irks them. That was the most expensive prison that California built. Most high-tech prison California built. And now it's full of smiling faces and TVs. Doors are unlocked. People can walk around. That was a horrible place, man. When I've done my YA videos, my Youth Authority videos, I've always said that was the worst experiment that California ever did on kids. Pelican Bay shoe was the worst experiment that California ever did on men. As I said, a lot of people went insane in there. Dudes that you knew. Next thing you know, they're smearing feces all over their body. There's a piece of trash, a tiny piece of trash on the tier, and it's driving them insane. They're throwing their fishing line out there. And they're going to keep throwing it out there until they can get that in there. Get it back in their cell so they can flush it. Meanwhile, everybody else in that pod knows this dude lost his mind, eh? If you get out on the tier with them, you got to handle that. Prison is not a place for sympathy. I've said it several times, and let me say it again. If you want to find sympathy in prison, look in the dictionary. That's where it's at. A dude loses his mind, unless the staff move him, he's a sitting duck. And he's a sitting duck because of his instability mentally. He's a threat. That's just another glimpse into Pelican Bay. It's my video for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.